Welcome, and thank you for joining today's MLC Masterclass session as a part of our Future of Manufacturing project, from sci-fi to shop floor, turning bold ideas into reality. Before we begin our session, we have just a few housekeeping items. We have muted all participant lines in order to maintain the sound quality throughout the session. However, we do encourage asking questions at any point by placing them in the questions box or the chat area. We will do our best to address all of your questions either during the session or during the Q&A portion of the event. This session is being recorded and will be sent via email within 48 hours of its conclusion, as well as available on the Manufacturing Leadership Council website within approximately 5 to 7 business days. And now I would like to welcome MLC's Content Director and today's moderator, Jeff Puma. Jeff, I turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Lauren, and welcome everyone to today's call. I could not be more excited for this conversation on sci-fi and manufacturing. As a kid, I remember seeing Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi in theaters multiple times. It was an era before VHS, so my family got HBO specifically so we could watch what Star Wars nerds now call reluctantly Episode 4: A New Hope. I suspect I'm not alone in how Star Wars and other sci-fi movies, uh, TV shows, books, cartoons captured my imagination. And what's more, like many of you, I've had the opportunity to visit many factory floors, and I've been fascinated to see that there are things that are not too different from R2D2 and C3PO on shop floors or coming soon. And switching from a galaxy far, far away to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, uh, you can even find real world applications for things like Tony Stark's Edith glasses or his Jarvis AI system in play at factories today or again coming soon. And those are just a few of the examples. So let's dive into our conversation, or maybe I should say blast off on our sci-fi to the shop floor adventure. And I should be ashamed, and I apologize for that silly comment, and I'll try to keep those to a minimum, but I really am going to nerd out today, I think. So here to help us navigate this transition from sci-fi to reality and explain the technology and digital leadership opportunities and challenges are my guests, Stephen Lefevre, President, Technology Solutions for Hyster-Yale Materials Handling, and Teresa Goland, Executive Director for Manufacturing at Launch by NTT Data. So welcome and thanks for being here. And I hope you are as excited to nerd out about this stuff as I am.
We are. Good morning, everybody. We're
Good
excited to
morning.
talk to you.
Absolutely. Don't hold yourself back, Jeff. Let's go.
All righty. So let's start with a couple questions here, and if there are questions from the audience, we'll weave those in. So please, again, I encourage people who are joining us as participants to add those into the Q&A box. But let's start out here with a couple questions that I have. So
And Jeff,
science
should we
fiction.
introduce ourselves real quickly or?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I'll jump in. Teresa, as it showed on the slide. I lead go-to-market for manufacturing in North America at Launch by NTT Data, which is the digital product practice for NTT Data. I was raised on a farm in Wisconsin, and much like Jeff, grew up on Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who. For the majority of my career, I've been focused on digital transformation, no shocker, from growing up with that. And the projects that I work on that are my favorite, I would say I call inventing in a fog. So I'm very comfortable with today's conversation. So thanks for having me.
Great.
Yeah. And real briefly, my name is Stephen Lefevre. I oversee technology solutions for Hyster-Yale, and we're a lift truck manufacturer. And, I agree. I think we've all created that innate uh, instinct to look at this technology in any way and say, wow, I want more. I want that. And then how do you process that for being leaders in the manufacturing space is something that it's been very interesting because we feel like we get to feed two things. We get to feed that kind of energetic youth, aspiring view of technology, and at the same time really make a difference in the facilities and the operations. And so we're excited to kind of dive through this together.
Excellent. Stephen, let's stick with you for the first question. So, science fiction often imagines intelligent systems and frictionless operations. From an executive perspective, how do you translate those visionary ideas into practical digital strategy, and especially one that delivers measurable value in manufacturing today?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, a great start. So, in other words, you know that you want your operation to operate at its best potential. You know there are new technologies literally every day available to impact those deliverables. How do you address that need? What I've found in partnering with hundreds of customers is that these technologies and the marketing of these technologies create what's a bit of a productive paranoia in the minds of leaders. And I think that there's a couple of guidance-based practices that we can provide that can show you how to navigate. So the first thing is it's really important to understand category definition of technologies available within a space. So in technology here, we have digital transformation as an area, AI as an area, automation area. Those are massive categories, right? So the first thing would be, okay, really what AI is needed, what decisions, what improvements need to be made. And then that just understanding, getting it down to at the category level and the definition level is important. The next thing is really what we want to talk a lot about today, which is in addition to it, incredibly exciting technology, are you partnering with solutions providers that can really navigate a frictionless deployment of that solution? I think many of us have been a party to signing up for a project. 2 years later, the project's done and we've forgotten the ROI of the project. I would wager that the value of a frictionless, guided, kind of proven install, easily supported, is equally as valuable as the solution offered by the technology available, right? So again, just to kind of break it down, is when you're talking about topics, data and digital transformation is one. Get to the detailed level. That'll point you in the best position. Same thing with AI, same with automation. And then finally, really figure out a way to not just focus on the pump of the technology, the snap crack of what's going on, but is the person presenting the solution as mindful of the disruption it could cause your facility as they are about the benefit? Teresa, do you have something to add there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that to pick you up on the technology piece of it, I think that going back to those examples from sci-fi, you think about Star Wars, the Empire had all the tech, right? But what, as leaders, the rebels had was this clear mission. They had fire in their belly, they had coordination, they figured out how to work together, and that's what won, right? So I think that as leaders, we have to think about what we can learn from not just IRL leaders, but also those fictional leaders, like Captain Picard and Captain Kirk, right? Like to me, growing up, those leaders showed what can happen when you set a lighthouse out for your team and you get them fired up about, yes, the vision, but also the guardrails, right? Because we are in a safety industry. And so I think that for us, I'll just, compliment what Stephen said. It's like thinking about the long tail of the support that you need, but also thinking about the safety is so important as leaders as we're doing innovation, right? Because to Stephen's point, you get fired up with that youthful energy about getting that tech out there, and it can sometimes put blinders on those safety guardrails that we need to embed into the system.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'll also just mention that we look at customers. Let's just take automation for a minute. You have probably 75% of surveyed customers want automation, probably less than 20% of them are using it, right? And you got to ask yourself question, is the delta between 75 and 20 or 15%, is it the technology is not ready? Or is it really that process of support and safety and not a 15-month project? And I can make it simple and operational for my team. Like the difference between that 75% of customers that say they want this new technology and the 15 that do is because they don't know how to cross that chasm.
That's a good point. Yeah. So Teresa, back to the digital leaders that you were talking about in the IRL world versus Captain Picard and whatnot. Where have you seen digital leadership already enable future state outcomes, such as autonomous operations or connected decision making? And what leadership choices made those outcomes possible?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I want to share the autonomous example. Give me just a minute, and I'll get to that because it's an exciting one. But I think that first, based on what Stephen was saying, about that adoption delta, is that we have to acknowledge that not everybody's future state is the same. Not every plant looks like a sci-fi control room, right? And so for some of us, when we go into those scenes, there's still paper and whiteboards, and people are still calling or texting when a line is down, right? And there's a lot of tribal knowledge. For some of you, maybe you already have a dashboard or you've got something going that's getting to this place. But I would say I hope everyone on this call that we have something we can point to that would have felt like sci-fi 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? Even if it's just one automated asset or one smarter way of getting decisions made across geographies and lots of decision makers. So I would say the leaders that I have seen who are getting it done and who are seeing outcomes are taking more of a product mindset to the innovation. They are looking at, like, I call it an innovation factory, right? We know as manufacturers how to make things, how to make tangible things. And if we can apply that product mindset to our innovations, whether that's digital twins, some AI innovation, and we're looking at it like a factory and we're putting out on the lines, you know, pilots and tests, and have a way of a methodology of judging what is working and what's not, so that it all can be held together and we can link arms with our leaders and our teams, especially globally, so that we're not having pockets of innovation in one area but not in another, so that we can really be bonded around that innovation factory approach. I think that's what I'm seeing is the most successful, and also not to be waiting for some big transformation, some big bang. I think where I'm seeing success is where when you're working in that innovation factory mindset, you're consistently turning small ideas around and you're getting those use cases on the floor. So I think that as an organizing principle and a mindset has been the most successful for leaders. It helps us, and the example that I'm going to share about the autonomous work that we're doing, you prioritize something that's specific, that's an operational problem. I think that number one gives a lot of energy to the organization to acknowledge we have got to fall in love with this problem and how we're going to solve it. And that will fit into your future vision. I'd say, secondly, we got to be able to set teams up to test and iterate quickly in a psychologically safe environment because things are going to go sideways, right? So that's important. And I would say, lastly, it's about putting those tools and the data not just in the hands of leaders, but also in the hands of the operators and the technicians. Stephen and I have seen firsthand how we learn so much from the operators and the technicians once they start playing with the innovations. And then lastly, just getting it into a place where you can do it in a repeated way, right? That you can scale it. So you're not starting from scratch every time. So yeah, good example. Long walk to a short drink, maybe, but a good example of that in action is what we're doing with Hyster-Yale on autonomous material movement. What we have going is an AI-enabled autonomous tugger that moves materials across a predefined set of zones in a facility. And more importantly, what it does is it connects to fleet intelligence, it connects to traffic management, to production flow. So what we have is not just about automating movement, it's stabilizing throughput, it's reducing manual touches, improving safety, and let's be real, all in a very busy, compressed environment, right? So I would say that idea started as a sci-fi like concept a couple years ago. And now we have it in implementation. And that's because of those leadership choices. And before I want to get Stephen in here, but before I do, we have another, I think, secret weapon, and that is a top-to-top leadership commitment to build a shared consciousness in our team. So we have one team, one motion. We have ways of working that back that up, so that as we get, through these tough moments in testing and getting in the environment, it's not perfect by any stretch, but we are working as one team. So Stephen, I'll tip it over to you. How did it work to move from this sci-fi like concept into something that people are actually able to adopt?
Yeah, I really love the comment that's made in the chat. I don't know if you guys can all see the chat, but there's a comment that says, listen, a pencil and a pen is valuable. You don't always need digital. And I think that's a really good viewpoint of exactly our approach for attacking this model is. We didn't get fully fixated on the technology and pretty much its maturity curve. We said, okay, what can be applied easily to customers and make the most impact? Not necessarily the lowest common denominator, because we are able to use some of the newest technology available. But I think that there's a lot of people that don't look at that whiteboard and say, hey, have I fully evaluated everything that I can get from just walking around and studying basic metrics? Our challenge, though, what we're really fighting is not that, because as I mentioned, 75% of people want automation, 15% haven't. Right? I guarantee 100% have a whiteboard. Right? So what's the difference? And I also believe that of those people that are the delta between 7 to 60% are really probably challenged to explain to their executive team, what are they doing from an automation strategy? What are they doing from a digital transformation strategy? What are they doing from an AI or a safety strategy? And so we have approached it completely from that vantage point. And so I think that's a really kind of good tie-in and a good closeout for the question.
So let's talk a little bit about the reality of our situations now with a constrained labor market and some turnover issues and some worker shortages and that sort of thing. How are automation and AI helping Hyster-Yale do more with less? And how do you evaluate the investments in terms of productivity, things like resilience and risk reduction?
Yeah, I think we're all in a phase of where AI is making us more efficient, monopolizing more and more of our time related to getting the most out of our day. I think that the technology that people are frequenting related to language models, we're applying a similar solution to material handling product or capital equipment, where we're using study of pixelization and recognition and then ongoing AI models to provide more and more safety features related to the truck. So just as a language model may help you navigate a spreadsheet or maybe look at historical data easier, or error logs or manufacturing output, that same sort of technology is tied into the sensor set that we're adding to either manual or automated lift trucks. So that's the AI standpoint, and we're excited about what we're seeing there. Really, just to add a level of, just like a ChatGPT will add a level of intelligence to your everyday life. These AIs will add a level of intelligence to the operators, hopefully making their lives a bit more easy and more productive and more safe at the same time. So that's AI. When you think about automation, when you look at lift trucks or movement of materials, you see this massive variation of application. But really, if you distill it down, you either have horizontal movement or vertical movement. And as I mentioned, less than 20% of customers have automated all movement of their forklift trucks. And so I think we're going back to what were the two chief disablers of automation and making that technology available to customers. One was cost, and the other was complexity. And we are adapting a market using the latest cloud technology and system partnerships with people like NTT to come at it from a completely different cost point. As I mentioned, we're focused on a frictionless install, right? So I really think if we put these in a bit of a levers for customer and say, give me the most advanced system, and then lever the disruption to their business, I'm saying that they're almost even. The same thing is, can they easily support it and change these deployments after the fact? I bet there have been many manufacturing teams that have been very enthusiastic about reviewing automation in the past. And then they ask the question, well, what happens if I change my aisles or my line? And they get the dreaded answer, oh, we have to come and we have to quote that. And that complexity creates this very waterfall, unagile method of managing change, which disrupts most of the good of what an automation platform can do, right? So, we want more customers to be able to get access to the system. We're focused almost more heavily on those softer areas of disruption, support, easy to change, because we believe that, not the technology, has been the biggest disabler of our movement so far. I also think that we've got a lot of disruption related to this and what this means for environments related to labor, and allowing them to be a part of this, to drag and drop, not just to necessarily replace labor, but shift it around. People always talk about that, but they don't provide a necessary pathway of doing that. And I think that's something that we're attempting to guide our customers through, is we're going to give you the automation solution. It's no longer code. It's drag and drop, simple kind of user interface. Take the people that are driving lift trucks, have them be responsible for that, have them do something different, but you're controlling it. It's not like this third party comes in and manages a kind of a section of the floor. So again, I think those are three ways. First of all, is get all the benefit of the AI. Second is, for automation, is how do we make it more appropriate as a response for customers' needs, focusing on that, removing disruption, making it frictionless. And then finally, how do we bring labor as a part of the solution and not necessarily a byproduct? Teresa?
Yeah, I want to jump in and just say that I'm most excited about the vision that you all have around a future where humans are not handling hazardous materials. And that is so exciting to me, that you have use cases and plans for taking the humans out of that loop. And that still today, in many places, and, even in my hometown, Wisconsin, people are still using, their bodies as a way to move around hazardous materials. And so I think that that's another innovation that I'm super excited about helping to bring to the world. I do see that as something where humans can be augmented and have, their roles shifted away from those hazardous materials. So that's just another, thing I wanted to throw in there. I also want to take a quick moment while I have the mic to exonerate whiteboards, because there's some chatter in the chat about whiteboards, and I know I brought it up, but I will just say I'm a huge proponent of whiteboards, and I have seen firsthand how much whiteboards can do to, yes, as one of the people commented, to get a leader really in an ownership mode of a solution. But I've also seen that whiteboards have a way of teaching our teams to not be so attached to an individual idea or solution, right? Especially when we're solving a problem, we're closing a market gap, or doing a leapfrog. We have to fall in love with that mission. And when you start to just wipe an idea off a whiteboard, it helps people release that, anxiety, that attachment they may have had to a solution. So that's my promo for whiteboards. I'm off. Jeff, please get us back on track.
Yeah, no. Let's stick on that automation and AI topic, and dive a little bit deeper into how do you make sure that these technologies empower the workforce rather than displacing it. And if you could also touch on why that approach is critical for long-term adoption, and the cultural ramifications of that and the cultural success of AI. Teresa, is that something
Yeah.
that you can kind of unpack for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I have never had a time in my career before where I have had such a polar opposite reaction depending on the people I talk to around AI in manufacturing. I speak to a lot of leaders who are just so bullish and so excited, and then I talk to people who are in jobs where, they have been doing something that is a task that is a repeated task, and they are very fear laden about their job and about the future of their career. And so I think that as leaders, we have to take a human-centered approach to this. We have to be advocating for the humans in the system first and not the tech. I think that's an age-old piece of advice that we've heard in the past, but it couldn't be more true today. And it makes me feel like I sound like Kevin Flynn from Tron, but like advocate for the humans in the system. Most AI initiatives, and frankly, most innovation initiatives that I've seen in my career have been human transformation stories before they were tech transformation stories. So we had, to look at this behavior and figure out how to adapt it, change it, tech enable it, right? But then somehow in our zest for getting the tech out and testing it and making sure that it fits with the strategy, we often overlook the journey that is going to drastically change for those humans. And then we see all the stats we all know, all of those AI projects go into the graveyard. And they write their ticket to the graveyard by excluding humans in the adoption framework, right? So I think that is something I would liken to when Agile first came out. Stephen mentioned Agile. Leaders didn't just flip a light switch and say, "All right, we're Agile now," right? We hired coaches, we changed how we worked, we built new habits, right? And that's the same kind of enablement I think we need to be applying to AI. I would just say, like, some of us have, I have someone on here that loves Ready Player One, and I'll use an example from the Oasis. One, it didn't replace the humans. It expanded them, it augmented, and not just in personal life and work, it also work life, right? And that's the right model for manufacturing transformation. But I'd say, there's an underside of that, right? There's a cautionary tale in that when you don't put humans first, like in Ready Player One, and you make it all about this powerful tech, and it's purely driven by cost or control or short-term gains, as with the IOI, it absolutely will erode human agency, in my experience. It will create overdependence on that tech, and it will degrade all of the real world outcomes that you set out to create. So I would say for manufacturing leaders, stay human-centered, augment workers around those repeatable tasks, especially dangerous tasks. Stay transparent, stay honest, act with integrity in the way that you apply AI-driven decisions. And then just balance that zest for efficiency with resilience and real world operational integrity. I think leaders who are doing that and approaching AI with intentionality, and they're not thinking about it tech first, I think that those are the ones that are experiencing success, and it's changing culture. I mean, I've worked with a manufacturer who thought that it was a cultural positive that they had such tribal knowledge and had lots of legacy systems and knew all the workarounds for those legacy systems, like their Model T. Like they knew how to hit it just right so that everything would work. So you're up against a cultural, change. And so I would say you need a lighthouse. And one of the examples I think of is when I first saw Star Wars, and I do call it just Star Wars, Jeff, I'm with you. Um, it was Darth Vader walking onto Princess Leia's rebel ship, and I saw those automatic doors open and him walk in, and I was fascinated with the doors. And I just thought, how cool that you could just walk up and, your body makes a door open. That tech was around in the 1950s, believe it or not. I learned later. But it was that movie, that movement that helped culturally us adopt it, and that tech skyrocketed after that movie. I'm not saying Star Wars is responsible for that tech, but I am saying if we as leaders think about that as an example to create something that you can show to people that it's those doors that can help reinforce adoption and why it matters and that it's safe to use and help them trust the tech, you're going to see the benefit. You're going to see people want to adopt it.
Stephen,
Yeah,
anything you would add?
yeah, I think I have I agree with Teresa, but I just have a very fundamentally practical approach to this, right? So if you think about the question of how do we make sure that our use of automation AI really reinforces versus displacing the labor. Well, first of all, we can't find enough people to do what we want to get done, right? So number one, right? I also believe, going back to that example of 75% of people want automation, 15% have it. The 15% of the people have it are fixed applications of movement. They're not changing. They're highly repeatable, as or they're highly hazardous. But that is a small segment of the world. If you want true flexibility, there's no true flexibility greater than the human mind. Right. So when we're approaching, just let's call it operators, we want our lift trucks to have operators as an option. But even on our automated units, operators are an option. They're all dual mode. So practically, you don't have enough labor for what you need. You need to figure out a method that ensures that you have ultimate flexibility, because I don't think if you're on this call or you're reviewing this content afterwards, you have that fixed completely, that cookie cutter widget building system. And so you're going to want to have that interaction between the human, keeping the human center, as Teresa said. And there's not enough space related to right now. So far, you're talking about wholesale displacement based on core automation. You're really talking about, you've got a lot of flexible and agile operations with multiple line inputs and multiple line outputs, or after line conversions that require weekly changes, cyclical changes in flow. You can't, there's no solution that will provide that ultimate flexibility beyond a human brain. And so the question here is like, okay, what can we do? And I really think my answer to the prior question just continues to sit with me. And it's really what Teresa said, which is, when you're introducing these systems, have them be introduced to and managed by the people that they're impacting. They're not this, like right now, automation across the entire AGV market is programmed by lines of code. If you don't know C++, Java, Python, you're out of luck, right? The new solutions, the solutions that we're building now, are drag and drop. I believe my 14-year-old eighth grader could fully deploy a robot with about 2 hours of training. So that's something to where you don't have to create this us and them, right? The now and the next. You're able to really kind of combine the two and figure out a very practical way. It creates the flexibility. It will create efficiencies. It will create cost savings. As you have more and more, turnover, you may have to hire less, but you're really just introducing a new tool alongside that same human element.
Yeah, I would say that's the thing that I am the most excited about for solving the gap in labor right now, and that's what I've been calling the intelligent trades. Stephen's right. The next generation of workers, they are digital native. They want to work at a company, a manufacturing company that is digital, right? They are interested in being operators and techs who aren't just running manual processes. They're interacting with systems. They want to use software. They want to, be able to use those interfaces to control data, adjust things, like Stephen said, drag and drop. That I think is a lighthouse for how our companies can attract new talent. And it also, I think, celebrates the knowledge that we have in the workers who've been there for 20, 30 plus years, right? We have programs that we're working on right now where we're doing remote assist with SMEs who can bring their knowledge, even if they're at retirement or have retired, bring their knowledge back and inject that into the system to help the next generation of workers. So I'm very hopeful about a future where we do have intergenerational work that's happening, that everyone's celebrating what they're bringing. And I think that to go personal for a minute, it reminds me when we first got our first computer at home. My dad, who worked in hazardous gases and welding supply for a long time, he didn't know how to use something, and I showed him, and I was really cocky about it. And he said, "Well, you know what? I know how to work the fuse box." And it just set me back, like, wow, this guy can shut the power off to the house, and I'm, popping off about what I know about Microsoft Word. So I think that's something that we all should remember, that everyone has something to bring, and that we have to value each other as humans first and bring that knowledge in. I think sometimes we can get excited about tech and start to wash away all of that knowledge that we have, that repo that's sitting in, to Stephen's point, the most flexible, system in the world, our minds, right? To capture that. I think that's what I'm excited about. I'm hopeful that the intelligent trades becomes wildly successful as a recruiting tool for manufacturing.
So, that also makes me think about something else. When you first see, or when we first saw the original trilogy, it was basically a story of these four people who came together and within like 4 days took down the Empire. I mean, spoiler alert for anybody who didn't see something from 50 years ago. But now, like, they've added on all this other backstory with Andor and Rogue One, and you find out that it's not just those four people. There's this network of people behind the scenes who did all of this stuff, and it took courage and it took systems and a network of people around the world and funding. They Andor season 1 or season 1, yeah, there's a whole thing about how they get their money, and in season 2 about how they launder that money and all this stuff behind the scenes. And I'm not saying that manufacturers should be laundering money for certain, but just like the fact that there are all these things that happen behind the scenes that we didn't see. We just saw, Han Solo and Luke and Leia and Chewbacca and the two droids. So but many organizations seem to struggle with moving from the innovation pilots to that enterprise scale of impact. But there is all this stuff that you're alluding to, Teresa, behind the scenes that's going on. And so I'm curious, like, Stephen, could you talk about how you've approached funding and governance and partnerships and that sort of thing to turn these digital ideas into the realities of what you're trying to do at scale?
Yeah, I think the struggle with that is real, which is we have all the appetite in the world for the value of these projects, but tend to underassign resources, governments, funding to that. And it creates these, as Teresa mentioned earlier in the call, these POC and die efforts, or these big bang type of projects that just become a way of life. And 2 years later, you're reevaluating the ROI. Yeah, so I think number one, approaching your evaluation of technology with this as 50% of the evaluation method is number one. I think that companies that really foster an easy method of deploying solutions, managing them after fact, as Teresa mentioned, the safety. I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record now that is as important as the technology itself. The technology is going to become more and more ubiquitous and somewhat commoditized when you think about basic movement of goods. There's only so much tech you can add to the movement of a product. Assembly is its own different thing, by the way. So I'm not talking about assembly, but I'm just saying, like, the question really is as this gets more and more mature, are we really evaluating our solutions based on the timeline of deployment, the data available during deployment, the ability for the customer to manage their own destiny or with future changes. We've seen in recent years, I'm talking the last 24 months, an automatic guided vehicle take 6 months to take 6 days. Right. And so that nuance didn't come from this massive deployment of new technology. It came from a refined vision to focus on a more appropriate, applicable, frictionless value for the customer. So I think that's the pieces of the puzzle, right? So in many times when you're evaluating, you're looking at the return of investment on a flow, on whether it's safety or flow or output. I think at the same time, you got to say, okay, realistically, not just cost either, because I've seen 9-month projects cost, not that much money, but the disruption to the 9 months is every bit of the cost. And so how do you get your mindset behind that? And I think I would listen to suppliers and solution vendors that lead with that. Now, they've got to have their A game related to technology, right? They can't just figure out these nice ways to deploy something that's easy, and yet the system is not high speed, high function rate, high high safety. Like you got to have both. But if you come in and you're like, all right, we have a solution for a horizontal movement application that has an integrated cloud platform that we can deliver on a Monday and leave on a Friday. Like that to me, I said nothing right there about the technology. And yet the entire talk has been about, sci-fi and all these different things, which is our human nature created by entertainment and media. But nothing I've said, I'm telling you, when I sit down with customers and I say, if you order something from us, it's pre-built ready, we show up on Monday, we leave on a Friday. Now we can stay another week to make sure you're using it ready, and I'm talking about complicated automatic guided vehicles. Like they light up about that the way they light up about the doors, or whatever, insert whatever sci-fi something special you saw flying. They light up about that because up until now, the technology has been visible, right? I've got hazardous waste. I'm using a person for, I need to automate it. Look at all this technology with cameras and visualization and localization and processing power on trucks. Look at all this stuff. And yet they don't see all that you can't change it after the fact, right? It takes months to deploy. I got to have hired trained software engineers to deliver it. And so I think that, that's a really good way to focus first on that struggle, which is, how do you take a pilot prototype to enterprise scale? It's starting with a supplier who values and focuses on that day one.
Yeah. Teresa, anything that you'd want to add there?
Yeah, I definitely, Stephen mentioned it a bit. I think that one thing that comes to mind as he was saying that is it matters the company you keep when you're doing these efforts. And in terms of how you go about governance and funding, it's so important to get creative on especially funding models. We have lots of, enterprising people at very entrepreneurial companies who are interested in the success of solving these problems, leapfrogging, helping you with the issues you have around, workforce shortage, whatever the problem is that you want to solve. And so if it's a matter of you asking a courageous question to that supplier, do it. I mean, no regrets. Just go and ask them, hey, would you be interested in working up a funding model, a joint venture, right? We have those models right now because someone was brave enough to say, hey, I know this isn't usually how this goes, but could we both have skin in the game on this tech and figure out a way that rising tides will lift all boats financially? And many times it's not what you originally imagined, but something works out where you can work together on a joint venture. You can bring in other ecosystem partners for funding who are also interested in seeing those advancements happen. Right. You can bring in academia. We're doing that across lots of customers. And it's work. You got to roll up your sleeves. And it's putting together teams that include lawyers, right? And finance and accounting, but you got to do it. And those are the new people that we're just making the tent bigger for who is in there for our innovation factory because it has to have a business model. And I think what's fun about that, especially when you're working in a company and you're maybe feeling a little footloose about wanting to get out and do innovation faster, you can create that startup within your own company right now. And it's about bringing together that company, like what Stephen was bringing up. It's customers who are going to light up when you tell them that you're bringing that kind of advancement to the scene, and they may then decide, hey, we want more of that, and how do we become a part of that? So I think that's really important. And then lastly, I think Stephen sort of talked about it a bit, but around the governance, I think setting from the very beginning what that governance model needs to be and then being willing to adapt it over time. We've seen that happen. We've been on a program for over 2 years, and the governance has had to adapt and change. And so just being willing to, hold on loosely, but don't let go would be the way I'd say you have to look at it.
Really good point.
So there's a couple questions in the Q&A from participants, and so I just want to remind folks on the line that you can add your questions into the question and answer box, and we'll get to them in a minute. I have one final question that I wanted to ask, and this circles us back to the Future of Manufacturing project, which is the MLC's project looking at what's coming and what manufacturers need to do now to prepare for that future. We've covered a lot of sci-fi checklists. We've of course not touched everything that's out there. Um, but as we wrap up and move towards the audience Q&A, what's something that still feels like sci-fi today that you believe will realistically show up on the factory floor in the next 5 to 10 years? And what do digital leaders need to think about now to get their organizations and people ready for that to occur?
I'll take a stab at it. So, I think that pathway to 15 to 75% of users with flexible automated guided vehicles supported by the site is something that'll be mainstay. I think, I am very interested. Probably the number one future topic that's on my radar is humanoid robotics and the impact of that. But I think that there's meaningful changes in the industry, both in the small material movement as well as the heavy, big material movement at lower cost points, at lower complexity rates that you might have had a side project where you have a small area that has automation. I think it'll be more ubiquitous across the manufacturing facilities. I think every major piece of equipment, capital fixed, moving or otherwise, will have an AI element added to it. There's just too much available there that has too much benefit for added intelligence. I think it will be what data was 20, 30 years ago. Everybody didn't have data, they wanted data. And I think that wanting additional AI layers for flow management, for reviewing product quality, from safety of units, like that's going to be ubiquitous. And I think that that's going to probably, both of those areas are going to create this race that we really are focused on and having this conversation, is that there will be a productive paranoia, right? If there's not already, which would be shocking if there's not, that says, oh my goodness, I have major pieces of equipment with no AI intel, whether it's pixelization or text or data or sensor. That's going to be a productive paranoia. Or hey, I'm still manually moving a piece of material on a pallet jack, to a quarter of a mile in a building. Like those things are going to create a productive paranoia more so than necessarily new tech. But I think the humanoid piece is probably the thing that, I think that we'll see this massive grafting to more AI and automation, and then hopefully that'll bring about a bit of a early maturity view of humanoid is kind of my view. Teresa.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Stephen. I think that the humanoid piece of it, to me, I find that I'm thinking about things like down the road self-healing factories, like being able to leverage humanoids and AI predictive maintenance and robotics to when there's downtime, something fails, the broken pieces are able to fix themselves with the assist of robotics. I think that could be really cool. So I know pieces of that exist right now, but putting those pieces together, I think that's out there for me. More practically speaking, I grew up with lots of people, including people in my family, who would have to block out entire weeks to do inventory management at night. And I think about the global supply chain, and all of this has to do with counting what we have and the inventory. And to me, growing up, on a farm, it was always about waste not, want not. And I think about our industry and how in the future, I'm hopeful, near future, that we can have ways of managing the knowledge of what exists and where it exists and when it exists, so that we don't have fast-moving consumables expiring outside in a truck waiting to be loaded into, a location, and that we don't have people who have to, spend their whole nights manually going through inventory with devices, right? That we can put on glasses and have someone walk through, or have one of our autonomous doggers walk through and be able to capture all of that inventory and have it be done in hours instead of days or weeks. I think that our human minds can think of plenty of other things to do with our time than counting objects. But yeah, I think those are the two things that come to mind for me.
Yeah. I'm going to take a question right from the chat first here. What are specific examples you've done on the floor other than material handling?
Yeah, I can grab that, Stephen, and then if you have other examples from
Right.
your experience. I think one of the ones that I'm the most excited about right now is with digital workforce uh, training and management. The work we're doing with AR and VR and remote assist to support the training of people all over in all kinds of different factories and all kinds of different industries. That's been super exciting for us. We have been working with a company who had a 90% attrition rate because of the hazardous nature of what people did. So the minute people would get hired, they would see what was going to be required of them, and they would quit. So how do you move from 90% attrition to being able to have that stability of workforce, right? We already talked about it's hard enough to get them in the door and then to have them quit immediately. So using AR and VR in order to teach them how to do those high frequency activities, how to stay safe in a very controlled environment and get that muscle memory down so that they have the confidence to move forward in that role. I think that's been really cool. I mentioned it earlier. The other example is that we have a company who has been able to take an employee who's only been there a couple years and be able to have them backed with the knowledge of someone who's been in that system for 20 plus years through remote assist. And now that requires, I said earlier, it requires a major behavioral shift, right? That worker who's been there only a couple years and who's gotten used to just texting or calling someone that they know has to be willing to say, okay, actually, I'm going to put the remote assist on because now I'm going to have access to this corpus of knowledge and the ability to share files and keep them in a container for all of us in the company to have access to down the road, and it'll make us all better. Like it does require that behavior shift, but those are two examples I would share that have been really successful so far in my experience with digital workforce management. Stephen, do you have any that come to mind?
I'm myopic to material handling. So so that's I'm glad you were on to answer that question.
No worries.
All right. Um, uh, Stephen, I'm going to throw this one to you. You talked about automation, working alongside people rather than replacing them. Uh, Sorry, I'm reading this as it came in. So, what advice do you have to create a good human-machine collaboration? What's that look like on the shop floor?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that. I think not separating the current human element from the project is huge. I think having some solution providers that you're working with that are very focused on bringing in the existing talent and the existing expertise into the process, I think it's incredibly important. I think our major opportunity, as it's a bit odd, right, is that we're on here talking about sci-fi and how do you appropriate sci-fi within your facility, and really face the productive paranoia of the fact that you're seeing all these things show up in magazines and ads and movies and everything, right? But in in this instance, the most critical question is the question that Jeff just asked, which is, can you deploy a solution with value, making sure you don't lose any of the thing that makes you great today? Uh, and um, and I think that's the struggle. That's the struggle. And I hopefully, over the last hour or so, we've provided some guidance related to the fact that you don't have to be sold out to the technology that you're seeing. You don't have to be sold out to just the let's call it the the illustrations you're seeing in magazines or whatever. You can get sold out to both. Like, is this system tying in the parts of our operation that make us great, and is it sustainable? So yeah, again, I think that hopefully that's a big takeaway. Yes, we're excited about all the new tech that's coming at us. Yes, there's new and creative ways to use technology to impact every manufacturing floor in the country. But at the same time, how are we doing it in the right way to be frictionless, to be human centered, to figure out ways to use it as a growth tool. Teresa mentioned Lighthouse a few times for your organization. So we're hopefully that's something that the audience members have taken away from today.
Great.
Thank you.
Uh, we only have a couple minutes left here. Teresa, here's another question from the Q&A box. My company has had some complex automation rollouts that really burdened our team. What can companies do to make this process smoother when they're seeking out solution providers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that what I had mentioned earlier about that taking a product mindset, when we think about the automation as a product that we're building, we want to clear gates quickly, right? When I talked about testing and iterating quickly, not sure in this particular person's case if they had a long, duration where they were going to be able to, have to wait a while before they could see
Mhm.
success. I think that for me, what I've experienced that has been more helpful is when organizations can get some wind in their sails with some early successes. So taking smaller bites of the elephant up front. And that may sound really elementary, but it can really hurt a project when you have design by committee with lots of stakeholders who suddenly you have an entire, product that you're building that's going to take 18 months or 3 years to build, and that can really burn out a team. And I think when we think about the human element, not everyone has that same perseverance and passion and drive, right? Some of us need immediate validation that what we're doing is working and that we're seeing some kind of success. So, I would say that that can be a way to move forward. And I would also say to just hearten you that what you have done, it matters, and it's at least getting the start of the muscle memory, right? That, if you're like a toddler walking, yeah, you fell and you got to get a chair or somebody to help, get you back up, but find that chair, find that person, get back up and know that what you did, whether you know it or not, is going to help create probably a change in your company or an industry change that we're not really going to see for years, right? Like these are the behaviors that we're doing now that are going to lead to a leapfrog later. And it's so hard to, I think, get teams excited about that when many of them, may not be as attached to the outcome as we are as leaders. So I would say, starting with that, looking at what is driving the motivation of each of those team members, especially where you're seeing obstacles or resistance, pay attention to that resistance, pay attention to that obstacle. Take time out and literally get in a room with a whiteboard and figure out why they have that resistance, because I guarantee you the times that we have done that, when we've done customer research, we have found that there are legitimate reasons for that resistance, and we as leaders need people to open up those blind spots for us. So long answer, let's go to coffee. I'd like to talk more about that problem.
That's great. And we are just about out of time. So we have some other questions. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to them after the call ends. Lauren, thank you for bringing up the slides. Thank you to Stephen and Teresa.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the chance to nerd out with you about sci-fi and manufacturing. And I do have one regret that I didn't get to say these aren't the droids you're looking for. But anyway,
May the
Stephen,
force be
I
with
think
you.
you have some resources that you uh, have shared with us on the next slide there, Lauren? Yes. Okay, excellent. So here are some additional resources from Hyster-Yale and NTT Data that will help to complement the conversation we've had. There was a question in the Q&A box about asking for some more information. So here's your chance with these QR codes. And I hope you're able to scan those um, and take a little bit more. There will be some follow-up via email as well. There's a couple other things I wanted to talk about. before we close out here. So first off, the Rethink conference, as you see on the screen, this is Manufacturing 4.0's most important annual event for anyone who's involved in digital transformation leadership. Whether you're a leader or doer, you want to be in Scottsdale in June for this event. It's not to be missed. It's your chance to network and experience collaborative learning with people on that same journey that you are on. I could talk passionately about this about as much as I can about Star Wars. It's a gateway to the MLC ecosystem, and it's where you're going to hear these conversations about that convergence of technology and organization and leadership change and what you need to do now. Um, and if that's not enough, we're also going to have our first ever golf outing on 6/21, and the week will culminate with the Manufacturing Leadership Gala on 6/24. So definitely plan to be in Scottsdale for this. I would not be surprised if this sells out, so don't delay. Get registered today. And we'll have some other future of manufacturing project events coming out. We'll be emailing you about those, so make sure you check your email. You'll also get a recording of this event and some other resources. And we're exceptionally grateful to Teresa and Stephen for joining us. And thank you to our participants. And have a great day. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at that email that's on screen.